Hello, welcome to video V of the ABCs of Leadership. I am Rachel Williams, Women's Leadership Coach, and this is part of my alphabetical series of videos that I've been making on different topics regarding female leadership. And today is the letter V for vulnerability. What does vulnerability mean and why is it important for leadership? But before I dive into that, you may see that I have a new office for those of you who have been watching the series for a while or binging from A through V. You'll see a different background behind me. That's because we moved, which was part of the reason for the temporary pause on these videos. And you see my trusty sidekick, Gunner, in the background. So, vulnerability. What does it mean to be vulnerable and why is it important for leadership? Vulnerability to me is really letting your humanness, your human shine through. We're all humans, we all make mistakes, and we're all these beautiful individual expressions of energy, honestly. And a lot of anxiety, imposter syndrome, etc., comes when you aren't living in alignment with who you truly are and living in your zone of genius. And I'm sure that I've talked about that in prior videos. And I know that I have referenced my favorite quote by Einstein, something along the lines of, if a fish spent its whole life trying to climb a tree, it would believe that it was stupid. And that's just a paraphrase, but it's one of my favorite quotes because it really demonstrates what life could feel like if you aren't living in true alignment with who you are. So my personal story with vulnerability has been kind of a hard one thing. I actually got bullied a lot as a child, and part of then my protection mechanism to make up for the shame and the loneliness that I felt from that bullying and that judgment was to be this overachiever and really put up a front, and everything had to be perfect all the time. And I had this deep seated, I still deal with layers of it, fear of making a mistake. In my critter brain of critter brains, making a mistake actually felt like death to me. It was that serious. And so for the longest time, I always tried to be what I thought people wanted me to be. I tried to dress the part. I tried to act the part. I tried to speak the part. And I tried to cover up all these feelings of shame and not enoughness with achievements and people pleasing. So, it feels great helping other people until you get to the point where you're taking away from yourself. When you'll know it when you hit that point, when helping other people starts to feel like resentment 80 to 90 to 100% of the time, instead of feeling good when people ask you for one more thing or you volunteer even for one more thing, and then on the inside you're like, why did I volunteer for that thing? That is when you know that your people pleasing has gone too far. So that is a long-winded way of setting up the story that, because of the shame, I went into perfectionism, people pleasing, fear of making mistakes. And so I really subconsciously, because I didn't intentionally do it, but I built up all these walls around myself. and I acted holier than thou, like always the goody two shoes, never really letting people in because I was afraid that if I acted like my weird quirky self with my sleeping dog in the background, um, people would judge me for that. And I was afraid of that judgment and I was afraid to look stupid. But it was probably in my early 30s when I realized that um, people want people. They don't want these fake images, these perfect images. And I remember when I used to, in my 20s, really look at my bosses and people above me as these, perfect people. They must have all their stuff together. Like that's how they're, at the top of the food chain. They must be perfect all the time. And I am so lowly. I am so lowly. And it wasn't until my late 20s, early 30s that I started realizing that leaders are just people too. And all my bosses were human. And I have been fortunate enough to have some really amazing bosses and mentors throughout my life that started demonstrating to me that it was okay to be human and that it was okay to share and be open about your humanness. And that vulnerability allowed this intimacy, this connection that fosters that know, like, and trust that will have people follow you to the ends of the earth or pretty close, right? They become very loyal. Let's say that. And in fact, I still actually work for my boss that hired me right outside of college. I, you know, made my own career path, detoured for a while, but I came back to that person because they were vulnerable, loyal, and honestly, a really great and compassionate leader. So, why is vulnerability important for leadership? Because it allows your following and also the people that you do business with to connect with you. And it allows you to bring all of who you are to work, which is super important for that alignment piece that I talked about earlier in the video, which is what keeps you from running into burnout, imposter syndrome, etc. So, hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. And this is not an overnight thing. It can be, but don't be afraid to start small. Pick maybe one or two of your coworkers or friends, even you can start outside of the workplace and just share something maybe that you normally wouldn't share. And generally, you will find that when you are brave enough to share vulnerable pieces of yourself, it makes the person across from you just appreciate you that much more. And a little bit on the judgment piece, you're not going to be everyone's cup of tea. And so when you put vulnerable pieces of yourself outside to the public, some people may judge you, but if they are, then they're not actually your people. But the beautiful thing about that is the people that are your people are going to love you that much more. They're going to resonate you. They're resonate with you. They're going to see you. So you may lose some people when you start being your vulnerable, express self, but those will be replaced with your ride or die tribe. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions or personal experiences, or if you can identify with my childhood story. And I'd love to see it all in the comments below, and let me know if you enjoyed this video. And if you'd like to be a part of supportive community of women who are working together to be our authentic selves and let that propel us into natural leadership, please join us in the Authentic Women's Leadership Facebook group. I would love to have you. Have a great rest of your day.